93 guys, today's video is going to be on Liber Oz. So Liber Oz. Liber Oz is a very important document to me and to all Thelemites. It basically declares our human rights, not just Thelemites but all human beings. Therefore it is a document to be taken very seriously. The document itself is a 220-word manifesto written by the prophet of Thelema, Crowley, in 1941. That's over 30 years after the reception of the Book of the Law. Now the number 220 holds importance with Thelemites because 220 is the total number of verses in the Book of the Law, but also 220 is the sum of 10 times 22, 10 representing the number of Sephiroth on the Tree of Life, and 22 representing the number of paths on the Tree of Life. Therefore, the number 220 represents the Tree of Life in its entirety. So why call it Liber Oz? Well, for that answer, we'll have to get into our gematria, otherwise known as Kabbalics. But what is gematria? Well, there are 22 paths on the Tree of Life because there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Each one of these letters has a numerical value. And by using those values, we can give other letters from other alphabets a numerical value also. Once we've done that, we can begin to draw similarities from words and phrases that share the same numerical value. It's really interesting once you get into it. Promise. Now the Hebrew letters that are used to spell Oz are Ayin and Zayin. Ayin meaning eye and Zayin meaning sword. An open eye often represents illumination and swords can represent liberty, justice and the intellect. Now the geometric value of Oz is 77. Other words that share this value are to break asunder, to destroy, to seek, to pray, towers, citadels, warriors, and might. So if we take all these hidden meanings of Oz into consideration, we can begin to draw the conclusion that Oz is a document that requires intellect to illuminate, and those who live by the law of Oz are warriors that fight for human rights to liberate us from the old law of tyranny. Now, before I bore you to death with all this Kabbalics, let's actually look at the document called Oz. Probably the first thing you'll notice when you take a look at a copy of Oz is this big, scary looking symbol right here. That symbol is actually called the Mark of the Beast. Yes, the Book of Revelation, the Mark of the Beast. It's Crowley's own design, and it has nothing to do with devil worship or the apocalypse. So why call it the Mark of the Beast? Well, the Mark of the Beast, if you notice, has the number 666 written on it. And 666 in gematria equates to the word therion, which is the ancient Greek word for beast. But let's take a closer look at the number 666. 666 is the sum of 111 times 6. Now, the number 111 has a few meanings, but most importantly, I think, it equates to the word love. 6 represents the 6 Sephiroth on the Tree of Life, which coincidentally is where the sun resides. So, therefore, the number 666 is a number of love and light. Not so scary now, is it? Now let's look at some actual text in Liber Oz. The first bit of text at the top of Liber Oz reads like this: Oz, the law of the strong, this is our law and the joy of the world. Now, that actually is a verse from the Book of the Law. Now, I don't mean to interpret the Book of the Law for anyone, and I don't mean to interpret this verse for anyone. That's the point of Thelema. The only person that can interpret the law of Thelema is yourself. It's what separates us from every other religion out there. But here's just some food for thought. The word strong doesn't just refer to Thelemites. It could refer to anyone who accepts who they truly are. Also, notice that joy is one of the first words that appears in this document. That's because these rights are good news. You should enjoy your rights. This isn't the time of the apocalypse or tribulation that was foretold in the old aeon. Next, it reads, Do it thou worship the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that and no other shall say nay. Now, I've already really covered those two verses in my last video, so I'm not going to go over that again. Then, it goes, Every man and every woman is a star. Again, that is a direct verse from the Book of the Law. It will be improper of me to discuss the Book of the Law in this video, so what I'll do is provide a link to the official comment in the description box below. Now what comes up next is probably the most controversial statement in the entire document of Liber Oz. And it reads like this: "There is no God but man." Now I know what you're thinking, who the fuck is Alistair Crowley to tell me what to believe and what to think? Well, you know what, I agree with you. But before you go thinking that all Thelemites are atheists, that's simply not the case. Nor does becoming a Thelemite mean you have to denounce your belief in God. But whether you believe that there is no other God than man, whatever that may mean, I think the implications of that statement are this: that man is now responsible for his own destiny. Man is responsible for world hunger, for the gap between the rich and poor. Man is responsible for giving healthcare to those too poor to afford it, for curing disease, and the deaths of those humans whom man has failed to care for. No longer can we look to the sky and ask, why did God let this happen? It's man that allows these terrible things to happen. No longer can we comfort the victims of rape, crime and injustice by promising that their assailants will be punished hereafter, because there is no atonement after death. Man is now responsible for preventing crime from happening and punishing those that would harm others here on earth. So whether you believe in God or not, the implications of that statement are this: that man is now responsible for his own destiny in this new aeon. Now we get to the actual verses of Oz, and they read like this. 1. Man has the right to live by his own law, to live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. 2. Man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. 3. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch, mould, build as he will, to dress as he will. 4. Man has the right to love as he will, take your fill and will of love as ye will, when, where and with whom ye will. 5. Man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. The slaves shall serve. Love is a law, love and a will. Now verse 1 is pretty straightforward, but notice it says man has the right to die when and how he will. That includes suicide and euthanasia. Now, I mean, who is someone else to tell someone who is in so much pain and is suffering that they must stay alive on some religious or moral ground? It's absolute bullshit. It is completely immoral to keep that person alive to suffer a horrible death. Verse 2 is also pretty much straightforward, but it is my belief that the right to eat and drink what he will would include drugs, pharmaceutical and recreational. Now verse 3 is interesting because it basically declares man's freedom of speech. Remember, Liber Oz is for everyone, Thelemite or not. It does not discriminate against creed or religion. Therefore, and Oz will fight for their rights as well as yours. And verse 4, well, verse 4 would suggest that man has the right to love himself and others as he will. Thelema does not discriminate against gays, lesbians, or someone's sexual preference. Furthermore, if someone wishes to get a sex change to love themselves better, that is completely acceptable, of course it is. But what Oz does not consent to is rape and forcing yourself on a minor. After all, that would be a direct violation of the other person's will. Finally, in verse 5, we see that you're allowed to kill those who would thwart these rights. Well, remember that man has no right to interfere or impose his will on another, but in some cases, you are allowed to harm those who would interfere or impose their will on you, and in some cases, kill them. The slaves shall serve. Now, slave could simply refer to anyone who denies who they really are. And finally, love is the law, love and the will. And that's all the time I've got to talk about Oz, really. I hope you liked my video, and now that you've heard your rights, I hope you enjoy exercising them. 93s.